Our first topic is going to be why you should start early. And that means at any point in your undergraduate degree program, you should be thinking about graduate school. So I'm going to open it up to the panel now. If you want to give us some examples of why they should start early, some things they can do to start working towards graduate school, I'll leave it up to you.
I mean, you can start early just by attending a panel like this, right? Get the information, and information is power. You know what being admitted to graduate school is like. You can talk to advisors, you can talk to professors, ask them what it's like to be in graduate school, what are the benefits. And the more you know, the more we know, the stronger we are and prepared. And then starting early should be like mantra for every single step that that one does to prepare for grad school. Do research into programs, start talking to your advisor, to professors, start preparing the materials, go to several drafts. So in a sense, if there's something that I would tell a student, starting early would be first on the list for me.
Before we go farther, I realize we probably should have introduced ourselves. I'm Dr. Tamara. I'm a professor of history, and I'm the director of the Master of Arts and Liberal Studies program. Stephanie, how about you?
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Young. I'm an associate professor of communication studies and also the director of the basic course, which is all those wonderful sections of public speaking.
Okay. Oana?
I'm Oana Popescu-Sandu. I am an associate professor in the English department and the chair of the English department.
Elissa?
Hi, I'm Elissa Mitchell, and I'm an assistant professor in social work.
Okay, sorry, Al.
No, when people don't normally use my name, then they say Elissa very often. So sorry, that was a knee-jerk response. Sorry, Elissa. Hi, I'm Al Holen. I teach in the art department. I'm the ceramics professor here at USI.
Thank you. So now let's get back to why you should start early. One thing that occurs to me is that you want to be aiming for the highest possible GPA, because GPA will matter. So if you started off a little rocky, you might want to go back and retake some early courses to raise that GPA. Anyone else about starting early?
Yeah, I would echo that. GPA is important, and also the type of courses you're taking, the coursework that's required. A lot of programs, social work included, have prerequisite courses that you have to have taken in your bachelor's program to apply to the master's degree. So making sure that you're getting those courses so that you don't have to kind of play catch up after you've applied and hopefully been accepted.
Yeah, and I'm sure every discipline is different, but I know that in the arts, as much as our potential is, or our focus tends to be like to focus on one medium, very often with graduate applications and whatnot, they want a secondary medium as well. They want you to show strength in a secondary medium. So knowing those things, just kind of investigating the process for applications early, and then knowing, okay, I'm going to need a secondary discipline, that gives you time to focus on and pick up maybe some of those skills that you might have bypassed.
And I would also speak to, in communication studies, we're sort of that wonderful mixture of social science and humanities. And so there's a wide variety of specific programs. So starting early means talking with your professors about what potential programs would be a good fit, because at times applying to, 20 programs and realizing that perhaps that's not a good fit, I think that you want to start sort of doing that research early on, and also making connections again with your professors, I think can be really beneficial because they have the knowledge in those particular areas.
Any more advice on how one can go about finding and choosing a graduate program to apply to?
Thank God for the internet.
Well, one of the things in my discipline of history is we have a national organization called the American Historical Association, which has free online listings about graduate programs. So you can go and look and see who the faculty are, what their specializations is. So if you want to study medieval history, you don't want to go to a school that doesn't have any medievalists. That kind of, it will also give you some idea about how big the program is, what kind of financial aid is available, how much it will cost, which is always a good thing to know before you start applying. Anyone else want to add to that?
Go ahead.
I would add that, yeah, reaching out to those national organizations, and as undergraduates, like I didn't necessarily understand what those national organizations were. So talking to faculty about that, but those national organizations, yes, like Tamara was saying, to follow up with that, will have great information, and you'll see who is featured at like conferences and things. And what I found really valuable when I was applying, and what I always tell my students to do when they're thinking about it, is finding out what students are there right now in the graduate program. Shoot them an email, ask them what their experience is like, ask them for any preparation advice as well, because they're in the thick of it. And I think that that's a really great thing to do, to reach out. It also gives you a really nice connection.
One important thing to consider if you're thinking about social work is that it's also, not just a graduate program, but it's a professional field. So to become licensed as a social worker and to practice, you have to have gone through an accredited program. And so USI's program is accredited through the national, or the CSWE, the Council on Social Work Education. So they have a website as well, cswe.org, that you can go to and see all of the accredited programs at the master's level in the United States. So making sure that you're choosing an accredited program that has your area of interest or specialization for practice.
And now I'd like to ask all of you what your take is on extracurricular activities. How helpful might those be for a student looking at graduate school? And if they are helpful, what kind?
I would say philanthropic is always a great way to, is always a great place to look. Doing something that is helping the community, that is helping your university, that is helping other people is always, I mean, not just satisfying, but a fantastic reflection. And even sometimes outside of discipline, because that shows a level of organization and time management that that reflects positively, especially, undergraduate studies are so busy. And I know that our students, very many of our students have to work as well outside of classes. And then, boy, if somebody steps up and takes an opportunity to do some philanthropic work, it always affects beautifully.
Yeah, and in programs that may offer funding through research or teaching assistantships, it's good to show that you have some talent in those fields. Maybe you worked on longer research projects, or you tutored, or
You're muted.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. So anything that can show ability to teach or to undergo research can help beyond classroom work.
And I just like to add one thing here from my own personal experience. I had an undergraduate internship which directed the course of my entire life, because I thought I wanted to go to law school because they told me you couldn't get a job as a historian. So I got an internship with a big Chicago law firm, and it was fun and exciting. And I knew within 2 weeks I was going to go to graduate school in history. So internships are a really good way to get your feet wet to make sure this is the right field for you.
Yeah.
My apologies, my internet was wonky here. But I want to also say, I don't know if you've spoken about this, if you can attend conferences, even as an undergraduate, those national, regional organizations, at least in communication studies that we have, there are opportunities to have students present at undergraduate honors conferences and getting a chance to meet other students. Because a lot of times it's about those connections and meeting other students and, saying, oh, what are you interested in? And really great sort of opportunities to present your research, connect with other undergraduates and graduate students, and then also talking with potential faculty from other institutions.
Yeah. I would echo the internship and the volunteer comments, especially if you're thinking of going to applied practice and social work, volunteer in the area you're interested in. As Dr. Hunt mentioned, it might tell you don't actually want to pursue that path. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested and you think in working with older adults, go volunteer at a nursing home or assisted living, or do an after school program if you're interested with youth. So try to get that hands-on experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Okay.
Dr. Young made a good point about joining the different honor societies, and we have plenty of those at USI. And being able to attend those conferences, it's a bonus.
Okay, well, let's move on to the actual process of doing the application. Once you've identified the graduate programs you're going to apply to, what are some of the things that you think students really need to consider as they go about applying?
Ask your references early. So often, fantastic students, and obviously everybody gets overwhelmed with different things, but even if you're not sure which schools you're going to apply to, asking the faculty for those letters early really gives them an opportunity to stop and think about it. If we're writing your letters in a rush, it doesn't help you.
Yeah, and I like to tell students to prepare like a little packet and include your CV or resume, any kind of paper you wrote for that professor in the past, because we may love you, but we don't remember what argument you made, in that amazing paper you wrote 3 years ago. So any kind of information about the school while you're applying, if you already have a cover letter. So give us as much information as you can about yourself that we can use as kind of our ammunition in the letter. And of course, ask early, right? It looks like start early is like one of our mantras, as I said. Start early with that as well.
Yeah, you need to keep in mind that graduate schools can look at your grades. So your references are likely not going to talk about, oh, this person got an A in my class. Graduate schools are going to want to know about the qualities that you have that will make you a successful graduate student. So are you a student who was always prepared and ready to contribute to the class discussion? Are you a student who worked diligently? Maybe you got a B+ and not an A, but were you one of the people who showed your commitment to doing the best that you possibly could in the class? Those are the kinds of things that we would want to put in our letters. And so these are the kinds of things that you want to do to make you stand out for the people who might potentially be a reference for you.
Are you self-motivated? That's a big difference between undergraduate and graduate school. In graduate school, you have to kind of self-motivate yourself to do the work. There's not going to be that much hand-holding as in undergraduate.
I think on top of the references, also just look at the application, understand the process, know what's required of you to submit. Some programs may want 2 or 3 references, some may want 5, some may require the GRE, some may not. So just know what the application entails and what the requirements are so that you can be prepared as you're completing it.
And customize it for each school. Don't submit the same old letter to each school. Just speak directly to the school and to the people you're applying to.
Yes, and if they ask for some kind of written statement about why you want to go there, or a statement of purpose or something like that, it's always good to craft it to the school by saying, I see that you have a communal studies collection on your campus, and that's a subject that I have wanted to investigate as a graduate student. So do a little investigation about the school. And you can actually do that by going to these national organizations and taking a look at their faculty and their students and things like that.
Yeah. Don't do what I did as an undergrad, where I applied to 3 institutions, got rejected from the 2 of the 3, and partly because I didn't do my research on those institutions. Like looking back, when I wasn't a good fit, right? The programs weren't exactly what I was wanting to do, but I thought, oh, I want to move to the West Coast, right? Don't think that geography, don't be limited by geography is something to consider as well. And also going back to letters of recommendation, give me specific deadlines. I tend to be juggling multiple tasks and multiple things. So putting deadlines in front of me allows me time to say, okay, I need to complete these letters for you at this particular time. But be very aware that different programs have different deadlines. Oftentimes they're December, January for the fall, at least in sort of communication studies.
Yeah, and I want to kind of riff off what you just said there, Stephanie, and I know that this is maybe going a little bit off topic, but I think it's really important. And it was explained to me after I had finished my graduate applications, but don't be daunted either by rejection, because it happens, and it doesn't happen necessarily because your application was bad or because you're not a good student. Sometimes it was explained to me this way, right? So if you go to an audition for a play, right, you can have the best audition you've ever had. You sang perfectly and you danced perfectly and you hit every note and you had the best audition of your life. But you're a 6'2" blonde and they're looking for a 5'4" brunette. You know, it's not your fault. It's important to understand that that can happen, which then also leads you to the apply to multiple places, like you were saying, Stephanie. So I just wanted to riff off that. I think that rejection is hard, especially if you're an outstanding student and you're used to getting accepted. But know that it's rarely because your application wasn't good. It's probably because of the fit. They're looking for somebody who does research in a certain area and your research is in a different area. So I think keeping that in mind is important.
Yeah, and in English, for example, you may be asked to submit a writing sample. And of course, you're going to use a paper that you've already written. You're not going to write a brand new one unless, you really have the time to do that. So you're going to probably choose a paper and you got an A in it, but you're not just going to submit that paper. You're going to revisit it, maybe go and ask the professor that you wrote it for to look over it and reshape it to make a good writing sample. So that's why it's important to start early, because you need to have the time to do that.
I would go back to the fit issue just briefly for social work specifically. There are different fields or areas of practice. USI's is a clinical program. So if you know you're not interested in clinical work, you're not interested in being a licensed clinical social worker, you need to look for a program that's more macro or community focused to allow you to pursue those other roles, advocacy, administrator, whatever it is. If you don't want to be a clinician, don't apply to a clinical program.
And I'd like to add one other consideration here, and that's that while we're saying apply to multiple programs, you can't do that haphazardly. You do have to target it. And it's not just because you don't want to be rejected. It's because each one of these applications is going to cost you money. There will be an application fee. They will require you to submit official transcripts. There might be other kinds of fees and there's just the simple fact of getting your materials to them. So bear in mind that it does cost something, and that fee it will vary. So you need to find out well in advance how much you're going to need to apply to the programs.
Yeah, and I know we're talking a lot about fit, and that may seem kind of like a mysterious quality when we talk about it. I think this is the moment when you're thinking about fit to talk to your professors and to your advisor, so kind of they can explain how that works and kind of demystify the notion of fit.
And never be afraid to ask your professors. We love our students. We love to talk to our students. We love to help our students. So don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're going to graduate school, we want you to go to graduate school. So yes, definitely ask us. And that asking questions also applies to the graduate school that you're applying to. If there's something on their application or a requirement that you don't understand what they're asking you to do, send them an email, call them up, ask them, say, this is what I'm doing. Can you tell me what you had in mind for this?
Yeah, because in a sense, you're interviewing the graduate school in the same way they're interviewing you. So like students do when they search for an undergraduate program, it's the same thing. You can visit, you can ask questions, you can meet with professors, so on and so forth.
I learned the most about the graduate programs from those visits. I think that's a really, really valuable step to take. Granted, right now during COVID, I don't know how that works, and it probably doesn't work. But in normal days, those visits are very valuable.
It works on Zoom. One of my students reported that he spent the whole past weekend meeting with students in a graduate program, with professors. It was kind of like a virtual visit.
Now, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was about to say, I agree. If you can get a chance to check out the school prior to applying, that might also be beneficial. And again, like if there's Zoom opportunities at those institutions, take them up, because I think we also should value that sort of networking skills of just sort of getting to know folks. And it's one thing to sort of see what someone's doing in terms of research online, but getting a chance to sort of communicate and connect with again, grad students and faculty prior to even applying can be really beneficial. And it sounds strange, right? Because it kind of, as Oana says, demystifies, right? You sort of try to understand this process. Asking questions is really important, but getting to know folks to see if it's the right fit.
And it's also helpful if you have the chance to see what kinds of resources and facilities they have. If you're a history student, you are going to want to know what they've got in their library, because that is absolutely key to your graduate program. But I'm going to assume for arts, if you want to go and do pottery, if they don't have a pottery studio, or if it looks really shabby and not up to date, are you going to want to go there? Now, there are a couple things that you need to consider about the application, the literal application itself, and some things that are associated with it. First of all, proofread the damn thing and do it several times. Honestly, it gives a bad impression if there are spelling, punctuation, capitalization errors in your application.
Proofread that cover letter as well. If you are applying to multiple institutions, be careful, because again, you want to craft the letter for the specific institutions, but some of that letter will probably be the same. And so you want to make sure that that letter is for the specific institution, because I don't think if a program sees that you applied and your letter is addressed to a different college, that's really a good first impression. So that's something, just double check that in terms of where am I applying, and making sure that this letter matches the institution I'm applying to.
Mm-hmm. This is the moment where it's, oh, I'm sorry, this is
go.
the moment where it really helps to work with a friend.
Yes.
Have another pair of eyes on your application, because at some point it's just everything just merges in, and we don't know one sentence from the other. We know our brain fills in. So having another pair of eyes, an advisor or a friend, that helps a lot.
Yeah, and I think following the instructions for each school, like Dr. Hunt was saying, every school is going to ask for different things. And so you can have this nice packet put together and it's ready to roll out to all these schools, but one wants 3 writing samples and one wants 2 writing samples, and and by not following those instructions, you can very easily eliminate yourself, because that's very often what the jury does first, is they go through their checklist and make sure that you checked all the boxes. So I think having those checklists for each of the schools so that you can be sure that you are following their directions is very important.
Yeah, I would agree. Make sure it's specific to the place and the program you're applying to, but make sure you also carefully read the question and understand what they're asking for. We ask, for a little bit of life experience in our application for social work, because that's relevant to the field. We're not asking for your life history, and we're not asking you to overshare things that perhaps you don't need to put in an essay. So make sure you're reading through that. Like someone said, have a friend read that, have a peer or a professor read that, and just give you some honest feedback.
Does anyone have any advice on composing a resume or CV to send along?
Don't get cute. It doesn't need to be on pink scented paper or any of those kinds of things. There are so many really, really great online formats right now that are very discipline specific, even that show you great layouts and keep your margins intact and keep your fonts minimized so that you're not over highlighting or over underlining or doing anything that deters from that. But I think very often just listing the just listing the job or just listing the coursework or just listing the award very often doesn't say enough. We assume that everybody at like our university knows what something means, but I often think that just that one bullet point or 2 bullet points under a heading is very valuable to tell us what is going on. And most of the like online formats have those kinds of things, but make sure to use a professional online format for that.
I would also say don't overlook your volunteer experiences and sort of
Yes.
things that you were not, paid for. It's not a full-time job. That's really important, especially in sort of the more applied fields. So don't overlook it. Don't think it's not important. List it and talk about the skills that you gained from that experience.
And then in our field, you can have, I think students, when they apply to jobs, right, the resume is usually 1 page. You can have multiple pages. You can have 2-page CV that you submit, at least in our field. You can have multiple pages. And also, you really don't, unless it's really relevant, the high school stuff is probably not going to be beneficial. Graduate programs really don't care too much about what you did in high school. They really want to know what you did in college. How did you prepare so that for our particular program, and if you're switching fields, if you've decided, right, I majored in psychology, but I've decided to go into communication studies, that's okay. It's potentially telling us what are the things you did. And as Al said, sometimes some bullet points to sort of explain things can be really beneficial in that resume or CV.
And then make sure then in your cover letter that the cover letter doesn't sound like your CV or your resume. If we can see what you've done step by step, all the factual things in the resume, in the cover letter, we need to go into the why, and we need to go into what motivates you to go into a graduate program, what makes you click. Yeah, so we go deeper beyond the facts.
Okay, well, one of the things I have on my list here is something that wouldn't have been on there 15 years ago, and that's social media accounts. What kind of advice can you give our listeners on their social media accounts?
If your mother wouldn't be proud of it, don't put it on there. Get it off of there. That's an oversimplification, but anything that is untoward, that just, and social media isn't ever meant to be professional, right? That's not what social media is about. But there are judgment calls, and making smart judgment calls on your social media is really important.
And I would say, it doesn't matter if you're applying to grad school or not, just in general, being aware that employees will Google your name, right? They will search for you and do background checks and check and social media can pop up. So just being aware of those tools are out there that folks will definitely be able to see. And so, I would also say, there are sites like LinkedIn, for example, creating professional profiles can also help in particular ways. And so, but yeah, just be aware that that's something that folks have access to.
And as a related topic, when you apply, you're probably going to have to supply them with an email address. And if you're not using your USI email address, make sure that the email address that you have is not something like hotpants234. That's not a professional email. So many of us use just our names or something along those lines, but you want it to look professional. So if you don't have a professional email handle right now, make yourself a new one.
And that applies to file names as well, the files that you're uploading to the electronic system. Yeah, make sure that the application is not called The School I Hate or My Second Choice or something like that. Or that it says draft.
Okay, any advice, additional advice on an essay or writing sample?
think everything we've said about revising, proofreading, making sure the writing matches your interests and what you're applying for, right? You're not going to submit a psychology paper, even if it was great, necessarily for an English program. So you're trying to match as much the content and the field that you're applying for. Respect the word limits. Don't submit a piece that's longer or a lot shorter than what it's required, because people want to see the writing develop in a certain amount of words.
In some cases, graduate programs will ask you to submit a personal statement, and they don't give you any further guidance on that. What is your recommendation or your take on what should be included in a quote unquote personal statement?
I think authenticity is key without being overindulgent or narcissistic. You don't want to start every sentence with I. You don't want to work it that way. But I think a sense of authenticity is very important. If you say, my goal in life is to go to the University of Colorado and study, social work, and work under Professor so and so, you're catering to your audience. And I think a personal statement is an opportunity to say, I value my time with friends. I value taking care of this planet that we live on and living a healthy life, and hope to be able to continue these things as I generate my studies through, those types of ideas that are maybe a little bit more holistic or a little bit more just beyond the program that you're applying to. Be honest, be authentic.
Yeah, I think telling a little bit of how you got to where you are and where you want to go is kind of how I view it, is your trajectory. If you're applying to a social work program, don't say you like to help people. Everybody likes to help people.
That's been used.
More than that. Yeah, I get tired of reading. I like to help people. I want to help people. Everybody does. So tell us why or how or what that looks like for you. Be specific.
Mm-hmm. Same thing in English. I know you like to read and write, but be more specific about the kinds of things you like to read and why that particular program is gonna take you further in your growth as a person and as a professional. And as Elissa was saying earlier, just don't overshare. It's a personal statement, but it's a professional personal statement. So whatever you share from the personal life has to have a purpose in that context.
Yeah, and I agree. There's a relevancy. I would say the personal statement is an opportunity to tell me your story. That's your opportunity to tell me, where have you come from? Where do you hope to go? Right? What have you done? What you hope to accomplish? But oftentimes that type of writing style, I appreciate sort of the more personal narrative. It's a personal statement, but tell me your story, and how, again, your sort of story fits with, this particular program. Like what, how can you sort of accomplish your goals by applying to our program and being part of our sort of program? So, but storytelling, I think, is also important in crafting that personal statement.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of bring the CV to life, right? Tell us what you learned at each step that brought you to where you are.
And to remember that there are a lot of undergraduates in your program right now, and not all of them are applying to graduate school. It's a big step and it's a big commitment, and you are making this commitment and you are deciding that this is your trajectory. So the why of that as well, this, I believe that the lifestyle that I've always dreamt of will come through with this level of study, or I had this personal experience with, for me, it would be an artist, and really realize that there is something about the artist's life and the communication that can come through with this visual language that I feel drawn to and want to fulfill through a graduate program, being able to bring the relevance of going to graduate school into that personal narrative.
Yeah, I would never I would never say that any graduate program, not even business, would want you to say, I want to get a graduate degree so I can make more money. None of us want to look at what we do as being a springboard towards mere monetary gain. Graduate studies is to enrich you as a person, to give you capabilities that you didn't have before, to give you skills that will help you prosper in life and in your career. So definitely not even if it is to get more money, don't tell us that. So.
Or make sure that you go beyond what I did, which I think I recall saying something that I wanted to be in school forever. So that might not be the best approach either, that you want to be in school forever, although all of us are technically in school forever now.
So any final thoughts that anyone has, or any examples that you want to suggest as either this is what you should do, or as Stephanie and I have been saying, this is what you shouldn't do. So
I have a question for you,
Go
just really quick, if that's okay. I've received letters of recommendation for our graduate program from middle school teachers, elementary school teachers, high school teachers, best friends, people who have worked at fast food restaurants with the individuals. So how do you recommend students select the individuals who will prepare these letters of recommendation for them? I mean, how do they sift through faculty, or if it's not faculty, professionals who they've worked with, to determine who is the right person to ask?
That's a really good question. I think faculty would be great. I mean, I think you need to have at least one, if not more, faculty member, someone who's had you in class, who knows your work and can speak to that. In our program, we specify that we want faculty or professional references. So someone who has supervised you in a volunteer capacity or a work capacity. We would like that work to be aligned with, social work or nonprofit or philanthropy in some way. It doesn't have to be, but we've gotten, for example, people who, I babysit this person's children, and so we have that person write a letter. That's not really relevant. Yes, it technically is work, but I wouldn't call that a professional reference. So it's really important to consider who you ask and think about what they're going to be able to speak to. Yes, this person may be your supervisor at your, at your part-time job, but do they know you? Can they talk about your skills and your experience, or can they just say they show up on time and they do what they're told? So think about what they're going to be able to say about you when you ask someone to be a reference.
do bear in mind that there is a ranking system at universities, and usually it goes instructor, assistant professor, associate professor, professor. Now, that's not to say that an instructor or an assistant professor can't give you a good recommendation, but if the school is going to ask, how would you rank this student among all the students that you've taught? Associate and full professors are going to have a much broader basis for making that, because we just taught for longer. And so we can say, yeah, this is the best student I've had in, in 500 classes, as opposed to, well, I've been teaching for a year and this is among the best students. So just bear that in mind. It's not to say that you can't ask for it from an assistant or an instructor, but do bear in mind that that is a factor as to how much expertise and longevity a professor has had.
This question also goes back to starting early. So one of the things is that as you are taking your coursework as an undergrad, developing those potential mentoring relationships with faculty, so that when it comes time to request letters of recommendation from the faculty, we know who you are. When I teach mega sections here, it's, there are almost 300 students. And if you only had one class with me one time, it is very difficult for me to be able to craft that letter for you. So one of the things is starting early with making those connections with professors, even potentially having opportunities with doing types of research with them, because then they can speak into different capacities, right? We collaborated on this project or things like that. But you're absolutely right that really graduate programs are going to be looking for sort of specific types of letters of recommendation, and faculty usually tend to be at least 2 of the 3 of those letters.
Yeah, and maintain relationships with professors. Maybe you won't apply to grad school right after you graduate or in your senior year. Maybe you take a 1-year, 2-year period to work or do something else, but maintaining a relationship, sending us notes like, hey, this is what I'm doing now. This is, what I learned in school that helped me, so on and so forth, to kind of keep that continuity in the relationship and keep our memory of you in place.
I would say that continues to, and I know that this is a little bit off topic, but that continues to during and after those graduate programs. I mean, some of those great references that you get from faculty can be maintained while you're in graduate school. And I've enjoyed those relationships so much when students contact me and say, hey, we're doing this project in graduate school. I remember you talking about something like, do you have any advice? And that I value that tremendously. And then when that person is out in the job field, I can still be an active reference for them because I know what I know what their research has been about. And so I think maintaining those relationships is really important.
I just want to say, I get excited when students are considering potentially extending, right, and going on to grad school. So I get excited when students say, hey, I'm thinking about potentially going to grad school. I get excited when I hear from former students who go on to graduate work and are doing great things. And so in many ways, we're here as resources for all of you. And we get excited when we hear that you want to go to grad school. So I think all of you who have attended this panel, because it's an opportunity to get a chance to talk with all of you.
I would second that big time, because that's absolutely, I mean, it's so exciting. And it's important too, I think, for our undergraduate students to remember that we've all been through this. We've all done this. We all know how this thing works. And granted, it wasn't like yesterday, but I stay up on, like, if a student asks me, like, what are the best 6 graduate schools for ceramics right now, I can ask specifics and I can point them in the right direction without a problem. I stay active on that because I think it's important, and because I have my students' best interest in mind. And I'm sure you all do that too. I mean, you know where the best writing schools are, where the best social work schools are, and what, who's doing what in those fields. And yeah, use us for a resource, because we're here for that, and we've been through it, and we understand all those pressures, and we will do what we can to help you out.
And I'd just like to say, don't forget that USI has a bunch of graduate programs. So I'd say if you've got professors here that you like taking courses from them, check to see if there's a graduate program that they teach in, because it might be that graduate program will fulfill your needs and allow you to stay in the area and take courses from professors that you know and have enjoyed.